Ezra Blackwood's head felt like it was splitting in two. The harsh fluorescent light stabbed at his eyes as he struggled to focus on his surroundings. White walls, the antiseptic smell, a rhythmic beeping. Hospital. But why? He tried to piece together his fragmented memories. There had been a business trip, a last-minute flight to Chicago, the Hyatt Regency. He'd gotten back early, wanting to surprise Vivian. The sharp click of heels on linoleum snapped him back to the present. Vivian, his wife of 10 years, stood in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in her Chanel suit. Her manicured nails fidgeted with the strap of her Hermes bag. "I'm sorry you caught me with my lover in that hotel room," she said, her voice lacking any real remorse. "He didn't mean to knock you out cold, I swear. Please don't press charges." Ezra stared at her, rage building inside him like magma in a volcano. 10 years of marriage. A decade of shared dreams, struggles, triumphs. All of it a lie. "I'll destroy you both without the law," he replied, his voice hoarse but filled with icy determination. Vivian's concerned facade crumbled, replaced by a smirk that made Ezra's blood boil. She chuckled, the sound grating on his nerves. "Oh, honey, you'll be paying me alimony for the rest of your miserable life." As she turned to leave, something caught Ezra's eye. An emerald pendant hung around her neck, glinting in harsh hospital lighting. He didn't recognize it. It certainly wasn't a family heirloom he would have known. A gift from her lover, no doubt. Another betrayal to add to the growing list. Before he could demand answers, a nurse bustled into the room. "Mr. Blackwood, you have another visitor." "Your sister, Lydia?" Ezra's brow furrowed. He hadn't spoken to Lydia in years. What the hell was she doing here? The nurse ushered in a woman who bore little resemblance to the carefree girl Ezra remembered. Lydia Blackwood, now 35, carried herself with the wary confidence of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness. Her sharp eyes took in every detail of the room before settling on her brother. "Hello, Ezra," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "It's been a while." Ezra nodded, unsure how to respond. The last time they'd spoken had been at their father's funeral 10 years ago. James Blackwood's death in a car accident had shattered their family. Ezra had thrown himself into his legal career, determined to make his father proud. Lydia had chosen a different path. "I heard about what happened," Lydia continued, perching on the edge of a plastic chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Ezra growled. "What are you doing here, Lydia? Last I heard, you were chasing conspiracy theories halfway around the world." Lydia's eyes flashed with irritation. "I'm an investigative journalist, Ezra, and those conspiracy theories have uncovered some very real, very dangerous truths." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I've been investigating a series of corporate cover-ups. I think they're connected to Dad's death." Ezra scoffed. "Dad died in a car accident, Lydia. It was tragic, but it wasn't some grand conspiracy, was it?" Lydia challenged. "Have you ever looked into the circumstances? The brake failure, convenient lack of witnesses." Ezra opened his mouth to argue, but Lydia pressed on. "I've uncovered links to a company called Nexichem. They're at the center of this whole mess." Nexichem. The name sent a chill down Ezra's spine. It was one of his firm's biggest clients. He'd personally handled several of their environmental compliance cases. "What do you know about Nexichem?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lydia's eyes narrowed. "More than I can safely share right now. But I think they're involved in something big, Ezra. Something deadly." Before Ezra could respond, he heard hushed voices outside his room. He recognized Vivian's voice, along with a man's he didn't know. The words Nexichem and silencing drifted through the partially open door. Lydia tensed, clearly having heard the same thing. "We can't talk here," she whispered. "It's not safe." As if on cue, a man appeared in the doorway. Felix Reeves, Ezra's longtime friend and a private investigator, surveyed the room with a practiced eye. "Ready to blow this popsicle stand?" Felix asked, his casual tone belying the concern in his eyes. "I've got a car waiting." Ezra nodded, suddenly eager to be anywhere but here. As Felix helped him out of bed, Lydia gathered his belongings. "We'll go to my place," she said quietly. "We have a lot to discuss." Felix's car wound through the city streets, the tension in the vehicle palpable. Ezra's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. His perfect life had shattered in an instant, and now his estranged sister was talking about conspiracies and cover-ups. They pulled up to a nondescript apartment building. Lydia led them up 3 flights of stairs, constantly checking over her shoulder. She unlocked a heavy door and ushered them inside. The apartment was small but neat, filled with stacks of papers and multiple computer screens. A young woman with bright blue hair looked up from one of the computers, her eyes widening at the sight of the newcomers. Ezra, Felix, this is my roommate, Zarachin, Lydia said. Zara, this is my brother Ezra and his friend Felix. Zara nodded curtly, her gaze lingering on Ezra. The corporate lawyer, she said, her tone making it clear that wasn't a compliment. Ezra bristled. Environmental law, actually. I specialize in helping companies comply with regulations and clean up contaminated sites. Something in Zara's expression shifted. Really? That's not what I expected. Before Ezra could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw it was Harold Winters, his law firm partner. With a sigh, he answered. Ezra, where the hell are you? Harold's voice was tense. Vivian's already filed for divorce. She's seeking a substantial settlement. Ezra's grip on the phone tightened. What? How is that even possible? It's been less than a day. I don't know, but her lawyers are moving fast. We need to talk strategy. Can you come in? I'll be there as soon as I can, Ezra said, his mind reeling. He hung up and turned to the others. I have to go to the office. Vivian's already filed for divorce. Lydia's eyes narrowed. That was fast. Too fast. Ezra, before you go, there's something you need to see. She pulled out a file and spread its contents on the coffee table. These are the results of my investigation into Nexichem. There's a pattern of environmental violations, suspicious accidents at their facilities. And, well, look at this. Ezra leaned in, his legal mind immediately spotting the irregularities in the documents. This can't be right. These violation reports, they're identical to the ones I filed, but the data's been altered. Zara spoke up, her earlier hostility replaced by professional interest. I've been helping Lydia dig into Nexichem's digital footprint. Their security is tight, but I've managed to find some discrepancies in their financial records. As if on cue, one of Zara's computers pinged. She rushed over, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Holy shit. Ezra, I think this is for you. She turned the screen, revealing an encrypted email addressed to Ezra. With shaking hands, he entered his password. The message opened, revealing partial financial records that hinted at massive bribes paid by Nexichem to various officials and law firms, including Ezra's own. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ezra felt like the floor was dropping out from under him. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his career, even his father's death was suddenly in question. Felix was the first to break the silence. Well, folks, looks like we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned conspiracy. What's the play? Lydia looked at Ezra, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. That depends on you, big brother. Are you in? Ezra glanced around the room at his estranged sister who had never given up searching for the truth, at the brilliant hacker who had put aside her prejudices to help, at his loyal friend ready to dive into danger. Then he thought of Vivian's betrayal, of the altered documents, of his father's suspicious death. He took a deep breath. I'm in. Let's take these bastards down. Zara grinned, cracking her knuckles as she turned back to her computer. Now we're talking. Let's see what else we can dig up on Nexichem. As the team began to formulate their plan, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger and more dangerous than any of them realized. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it, no matter the cost. Ezra Blackwood straightened his tie, his face a mask of professional detachment, as he strode into the offices of Winters, Blackwood and Associates. The familiar scent of leather and expensive cologne did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. Every face he passed, every greeting he returned, it all felt like a lie now. He nodded to his secretary, Sarah, as he passed. Any messages? Mr. Winters wants to see you in his office as soon as possible, Sarah replied, her brow furrowed with concern. Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood? There are rumors. Ezra forced a smile. Just a bit under the weather. Nothing to worry about. As soon as his office door closed behind him, Ezra's facade crumbled. He sank into his chair, his mind racing. How deep did this conspiracy go? How many of his colleagues were involved? He booted up his computer, heart pounding as he began to dig through the firm's files on Nexichem. What he found made his blood run cold. Report after report of environmental violations, all neatly covered up with falsified data and legal sleight of hand. And there, buried in a subfolder, was a document detailing a toxic waste spill in a low-income neighborhood. The cancer rates in the area had skyrocketed, but Nexakim had managed to dodge all responsibility. Ezra felt sick. He had built his career on protecting the environment, on holding corporations accountable. And all this time, he had been part of the problem. A commotion outside his office pulled him from his thoughts. He recognized that voice, Vivian. I don't care if he's busy. He's my husband, and I need to speak with him now. Ezra steeled himself as the door burst open. Vivian stormed in, her eyes blazing with a fury he had never seen before. You think you can just disappear and ignore my calls, she hissed. My lawyers are going to bury you, Ezra. Unless what? Ezra asked, his voice deceptively calm. Vivian's lips curled into a cruel smile. Unless you agree to my terms. No questions asked, no fights. You give me what I want, or I'll make sure everyone knows about your dirty little secrets. Ezra's mind raced. What secrets? He had always been faithful, always played by the rules. Then he saw it, the watch on Vivian's wrist. It was too large for her, clearly a man's watch. And he recognized it. It belonged to Harold Winters. Before he could process this new betrayal, his phone buzzed. A message from Harold, my office. Now, Ezra stood, straightening his suit. We're not done here, Vivian. Her laughter followed him out the door. Oh, we're just getting started, darling. Harold's office was a shrine to old money and power. The man himself sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his fingers steepled as he watched Ezra enter. Sit down, Ezra, Harold said, his tone deceptively friendly. We need to talk about Nexakim. Ezra's heart skipped a beat. He fought to keep his expression neutral as he took a seat. What about them? Harold's eyes narrowed. I've heard rumors that you've been investigating our biggest client. I'm sure I don't need to remind you about client confidentiality. The threat was clear. Ezra felt a chill run down his spine. Of course not, he replied smoothly. I'm just doing my due diligence, making sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Harold nodded, but his eyes remained cold. See that you do. Nexakim is very important to this firm. It would be a shame if anything were to jeopardize that relationship. As Ezra left Harold's office, his phone buzzed again. A message from Felix. Got something you need to see. Meet me at the usual spot. An hour later, Ezra sat in a dimly lit bar, watching surveillance footage on Felix's laptop. His stomach churned as he saw Harold, Vivian, and a man he recognized as Marcus Thorne, Nexakim's CEO, meeting at a secluded marina. When was this taken? Ezra asked, his voice hoarse. Felix's expression was grim. 2 days ago. Ezra, I think your wife's affair. It wasn't just about sex. I think it was orchestrated to keep you in check. Ezra nodded, the pieces falling into place. His own firm, his own wife, they were all part of Nexakim's web of deceit. And he had been the fool at the center of it all. We need to bring them down, Ezra said, his voice filled with cold determination. All of them. Felix nodded, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the hunt. Where do we start? Zara's fingers flew across the keyboard, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. Lydia paced behind her, while Ezra sat perfectly still, his lawyer's mind cataloging every detail. Got it, Zara announced, her voice tight with excitement. I've decrypted the anonymous email. You're not going to believe this. The screens filled with financial records, showing a complex web of transactions between Nexakim, Winters, Blackwood and Associates, and a dozen shell companies. It's a massive money laundering operation. Lydia breathed, her journalist's instincts on fire. They're hiding millions in bribes and payoffs. Ezra's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Need to talk. It's about Nexakim. Meet me in the parking garage. Level B2. Mia? He recognized the name Mia Rodriguez, a paralegal at the firm. Young, ambitious, and sharp as a tack. What did she know? I have to go, Ezra said, standing abruptly. Keep digging. We need everything you can find. The parking garage was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of oil and exhaust. Ezra's footsteps echoed as he made his way to level B2. A figure emerged from the shadows, Mia, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Blackwood, she whispered, glancing around nervously. I found something. About Nexakim. I think they're dumping toxic waste illegally. Ezra's heart raced. Tell me everything. Mia's words tumbled out in a rush. She had been organizing files when she stumbled across documents detailing Nexachem's illegal activities. For months, she had been quietly gathering evidence, terrified of what might happen if she came forward. I want to do the right thing, Mia said, her voice shaking. But I'm scared. These people, they're powerful. They're dangerous. Ezra placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're doing the right thing, Mia. We'll protect you. I promise. As they formulated a plan for Mia to act as a whistleblower, with Ezra as her legal representation, Lydia made another breakthrough. She uncovered old news articles suggesting that their father, James Blackwood, had been investigating Nexachem before his death. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more horrifying than any of them had imagined. But as they prepared to go public with their evidence, a new complication arose. Vivian reached out to Ezra, her voice honey-sweet on the phone. Darling, I made a terrible mistake. Can we meet? I want to make things right. Ezra's instinct screamed that it was a trap, but he saw an opportunity. Of course, he replied, his voice carefully neutral. Our usual place? As Vivian spun her tale of manipulation and regret, Ezra discreetly recorded every word. He didn't believe her for a second, but her confession might prove useful. Their celebration was short-lived, however. Zara discovered that their communications had been compromised. Nexachem's private security force was watching their every move. The net was closing in, but Ezra and his team were ready for a fight. The abandoned Nexachem research facility loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Ezra's heart pounded as he and Felix approached, their footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass. Mia had vanished without a trace, just as they were preparing to go public with their evidence. Felix had traced her last known location to this facility, and now they were walking into what felt very much like a trap. I don't like this, Felix muttered, his hand hovering near the gun concealed under his jacket. It's too quiet. Ezra nodded. We don't have a choice. Mia risked everything to help us. We can't abandon her now. They found a rusted side door, the lock easily picked by Felix's skilled hands. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of chemicals. Their flashlights revealed abandoned equipment, shattered glass, and ominous dark stains on the floor. As they delved deeper into the facility, they stumbled upon a room that made Ezra's blood run cold. It was a makeshift laboratory, filled with bubbling vats of noxious liquid and cages that had clearly once held test subjects. The implications were horrifying. My God, Felix whispered, snapping photos with his phone. This is way bigger than we thought. They're not just dumping toxic waste, they're creating it. A noise from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps getting closer. They ducked behind a large piece of equipment, hearts racing as a group of men entered the room. At their head was Marcus Thorne, Nexachem's CEO, his expensive suit incongruous in the decrepit lab. Find them, Marcus snarled to his security team. They can't be allowed to leave here alive. Ezra and Felix exchanged a look of panic. They were trapped, outgunned, and running out of options. But before they could move, another figure entered the room. Lydia. Ezra's heart stopped. What was his sister doing here? But as he watched, his confusion turned to horror. Lydia walked up to Marcus, her posture relaxed, familiar. The basement is clear, she reported. No sign of them. Marcus nodded. Good work, Agent Blackwood. Your cover has been invaluable to us. Ezra felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Lydia, working for Nexachem. It couldn't be true. But as he watched his sister interact with the man responsible for so much suffering, doubt crept in. Had everything been a lie? The standoff that followed was tense, with Lydia clearly torn between her loyalty to her brother and her commitment to whatever mission she was on. Ezra's mind raced, trying to make sense of this betrayal. But there was no time for explanations. As Marcus's men closed in, violence erupted. In the chaos, Felix was hit, crying out in pain as a bullet tore through his shoulder. Ezra managed to fight his way to a locked door, behind which they found Mia, terrified but alive. As they fled the facility, alarms blaring and gunshots echoing behind them, Lydia appeared one last time. She pressed a USB drive into Ezra's hand, her eyes pleading. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll explain everything, I promise. But you have to go. Now. Ezra hesitated, 1,000 questions on his lips. But with Felix bleeding and Mia shaking with fear, he knew they had no choice. They ran into the night, leaving Lydia behind to maintain her cover, whatever that truly meant. As they sped away in Felix's car, Ezra clutched the USB to drive, his mind reeling. The evidence they had gathered, the risks they had taken, the betrayals they had suffered, it all paled in comparison to the realization that this conspiracy went deeper than any of them had imagined. And at the center of it all was his sister, a woman he thought he knew, now a stranger playing a game he didn't understand. As the city lights blurred past, Ezra made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Nexikim, Winters, Blackwood and Associates, even Lydia herself, they would all face justice. The web of deceit was vast, but Ezra was done being a fly caught in its strands. It was time to become the spider. The safe house was a far cry from the luxury Ezra Blackwood was accustomed to. Peeling wallpaper, the musty smell of old books, and a pervasive dampness that seemed to seep into his bones. But right now, it was the safest place in the world. Ezra sat at a rickety table, his laptop open before him, surrounded by stacks of documents. Across from him, Mia Rodriguez pored over financial records, her brow furrowed in concentration. In the corner, Zara's fingers flew across her keyboard, the glow of multiple screens illuminating her face in the dim room. They had been here for days, maybe weeks. Time had become a blur. Felix's activist contacts had come through, providing them with a network of safe houses to move between. But the constant fear of discovery, the paranoia that each shadow held an enemy, was taking its toll. Ezra rubbed his eyes, trying to focus on the document before him. His mind kept drifting to Lydia, his sister, the undercover agent. The betrayal still stung, even as he tried to rationalize it. Was she really on their side? Or had everything been a lie? Holy shit, Zara's voice cut through the silence. You guys need to see this. Ezra and Mia crowded around Zara's workstation. On the screen, plans for a massive construction project unfolded. They're planning to dump toxic waste in the Oakwood Nature Reserve, Zara explained, her voice tight with anger. If this goes through, it'll contaminate the groundwater for the entire region. Ezra felt his stomach churn. Oakwood was one of the last unspoiled areas in the state, home to endangered species and a vital water source for surrounding communities. We can't let this happen, Mia said, her voice shaking with determination. We have to stop them. Ezra nodded, his mind already racing with legal strategies. We need more evidence. Concrete proof that links Nexikim to the dump site. As if on cue, Ezra's burner phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Ezra? Vivian's voice, uncharacteristically hesitant. We need to talk. I want to help. Ezra's grip on the phone tightened. Why should I believe you? Because I know things, Ezra. Things that could bring down Nexikim, Harold, all of them. Meet me, please. For old time's sake. Ezra's mind raced. It could be a trap. But if Vivian was telling the truth, her testimony could be the key to breaking the case wide open. I'll think about it, he said finally and hung up. Zara and Mia looked at him expectantly. Ezra sighed. That was Vivian. She says she wants to help. Mia's eyes widened. You can't seriously be considering trusting her? We don't have to trust her, Ezra replied, a plan forming in his mind. But we can use her. If she's genuine, great. If not, well, we'll be ready. As they began to formulate a plan, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Nexikim's toxic dump could happen any day now. They needed to act fast. But first, he had a decision to make about Lydia. His sister was indeed playing a dangerous game. Could he trust the information she was feeding them? Or was she leading them into a trap? Ezra stared at the USB drive Lydia had pressed into his hand during their escape from the Nexikim facility. He hadn't told the others about it yet. With a deep breath, he plugged it in. What he found made his blood run cold. Detailed plans of Nexikim's operations, financial records, emails implicating high-level government officials. And at the center of it all, a name that made Ezra's heart stop, James Blackwood. Their father hadn't just been investigating Nexikim before his death. He had uncovered a conspiracy that went far beyond corporate greed. This was about power, about control over the most basic human need, water. Ezra leaned back, his mind reeling. They weren't just fighting a corporation anymore. They were up against a system, a web of corruption that stretched from the boardroom to the highest levels of government. He looked at Mia and Zara, both still poring over documents, unaware of the bombshell Ezra had just uncovered. They had all risked everything to get this far. Now it was time to take the biggest risk of all. "Pack up," Ezra said, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to meet Vivian. And then we're going to bring the whole damn system down." The Nexichem boardroom was a study in corporate opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while the polished mahogany table reflected the concerned faces of the board members gathered around it. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Nexichem, stood at the head of the table, his usual confidence noticeably shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that these allegations are completely unfounded. Nexichem has always operated within the bounds of the law." From her seat at the table, Lydia Blackwood fought to keep her expression neutral. Years of undercover work had honed her poker face, but even she was finding it difficult to maintain her composure. Everything was coming to a head, and she prayed that Ezra's plan would work. As if on cue, the doors burst open. Ezra strode in, Mia at his side, followed by a team of federal agents. The room erupted in chaos. "Marcus Thorne," Ezra's voice cut through the commotion, "you and your co-conspirators are under arrest for environmental crimes, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You have no authority." "Oh, but we do," Mia interrupted, her voice steady despite her nervousness. She nodded to Zara, who had slipped in unnoticed during the confusion. Suddenly, every screen in the room came to life. Financial records, emails, surveillance footage, all the evidence they had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks played out for all to see. At this very moment, Ezra continued, "This evidence is being broadcast to every Nexichem employee, shareholder, and regulatory agency. The game is over, Marcus." Lydia stood, finally dropping her cover. "And that's not all. We have proof that Nexichem was responsible for the death of James Blackwood, a man who threatened to expose your plan to monopolize water resources through deliberate contamination." The color drained from Marcus's face. He lunged for his laptop, likely containing even more incriminating evidence. But Ezra was faster. What followed was a desperate chase through the Nexichem headquarters. Ezra pursued Marcus through winding corridors and up staircases, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly empty building. They burst onto the roof. The city spread out before them. Marcus stood at the edge, the hard drive clutched in his hand, the wind whipping his usually immaculate suit. "It's over, Marcus," Ezra called out, cautiously approaching. "There's nowhere left to run." Marcus turned, a wild look in his eyes. "You don't understand, Blackwood. This goes beyond Nexichem, beyond me. We were creating a better world by poisoning people, by killing my father." Ezra's voice cracked with emotion. "How is that a better world?" "Resources are running out," Marcus snarled. "Water is the new oil. Whoever controls it controls everything. Your father was too idealistic to see that. Just like you." Ezra took another step forward. "It doesn't have to be this way, Marcus. Turn yourself in. Tell the truth. Maybe then we can actually build a better world." For a moment, it seemed like Marcus might consider it. Then, with a bitter laugh, he hurled the hard drive off the roof. Ezra lunged for it, but it was too late. The small device disappeared into the city below, taking with it the names of countless corrupt officials. As the authorities led Marcus away, Ezra stood at the edge of the roof, looking out over the city. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The congressional hearing room was packed. Journalists, activists, and curious citizens filled every available seat, while cameras broadcast the proceedings to millions around the world. Ezra adjusted his tie, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. Beside him, Lydia gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Despite the years of separation and recent revelations, they were in this together now. "Mr. Blackwood," the committee chairman began, "please tell us in your own words what you uncovered about Nexichem and its collaborators." For the next several hours, Ezra and Lydia laid out the entire conspiracy. The environmental violations, the cover-ups, the bribes, and finally, the truth about their father's death. As they spoke, screens around the room displayed evidence, much of it provided by Harold Winters in exchange for a plea deal. In another part of the city, Vivian Blackwood was led away from her private jet in handcuffs, her attempt to flee the country thwarted by an anonymous tip. Back in the hearing room, Ezra concluded his testimony. Nexichem's crimes are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper sickness in our society, where profit is prioritized over people, and the environment is seen as a resource to be exploited rather than protected. It's time for a change. The aftermath of the hearing was a whirlwind. Indictments were handed down, regulations were tightened, and a national conversation about corporate responsibility and environmental protection took center stage. Months passed. Ezra found himself standing before a group of eager law students, their faces a mix of idealism and uncertainty that reminded him of himself not so long ago. The law is a powerful tool, he told them, but it's only as good as the people wielding it. You have the power to shape the future, to fight for justice, to protect those who can't protect themselves. Use it wisely. As the students filed out, Ezra's phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. Her book exposing corporate environmental crimes was hitting shelves next week. Another step in their ongoing fight. Later that evening, Ezra met with Felix and Zara at their new office. The sign on the door read, "Clearwater Tech, Innovative Solutions for a Cleaner Future." Felix, his arm still in a sling but his spirit unbroken, grinned as Ezra entered. "Welcome to the revolution, counselor." Zara looked up from her computer, her eyes bright with excitement. "We've just finalized the plans for our first water purification plant." "Want to see?" As Ezra looked over the plans, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. They had a long way to go, but they were on the right path. His phone buzzed again. A message from Mia, now in her second year of law school, top of her class. She was interning at an environmental law firm over the summer and wanted Ezra's advice on a case. Ezra smiled as he typed his reply. The fight for justice was far from over, but they weren't in it alone anymore. A new generation was rising, armed with knowledge, passion, and the determination to make a difference. As he left the office that night, Ezra paused to look up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. Somewhere up there, he liked to think his father was watching, proud of what they had accomplished and what they continue to fight for. The web of deceit had been torn down, but the work of rebuilding, of creating a more just and sustainable world, was just beginning. And Ezra Blackwood was ready for the challenge. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.